Alright, for the second half here, we're going to work through some of the more complicated nesting and some of the features, but before I do that, I want to go over just a couple of the basics that we discussed during the break. And one of those is managing data in general. And the whole reason for nesting objects in the first place is so that we can manage enormous amounts of data. So for example, you'll notice here that in the V, so I've got a V1, V2, all the way up to V8. I've got 8 layers with which to work, and sometimes that's just not enough. Sometimes I have too many elements working all at the same time, and I need 16 or 20 or 40 layers in order to work with. And when it comes to that, what I'll often do is I'll take 5 or 6 of my elements, and then I'll get them doing what they need to do, and then I'll nest them together so that I can run them, and I'll show you an example. I believe I did that with my Pac-Man game that I showed last time, but I'll show that effect. At any time, if I need to add a layer, I can do one of two things. I can take an element and I can drag it above the top layer in this section here, and you'll see there that it adds a new layer to the top, or I can right-click on an existing layer and add track, and that will also add a new visual track to my layer so that I have more to work with. Now, I really can probably make 30 layers, but it's going to squeeze out the visual space that I have for what I'm editing and my effect controls. And it's gonna squeeze those out, and I need to see what I'm doing in order to make proper edits. Now, I also have sometimes when I need just a little bit of help, I have this slider over here that will expand or contract, so I can make these a little thinner if I need to fit a couple more layers on there. And I can do the same thing with my audio as well. I can squeeze those down so that while I'm not working on them, they're not taking up a lot of visual space. And then I can say, ooh, I want to move this down so that I can see more of what I'm working on here. And that may just be while I'm working on a specific element. I may also, right here I have different zoom modes that I can zoom in, and I can say I may also want to work at 150% while I'm working just on this little element, so that space-wise and whatnot, I can find it easier just while I'm working on it, and then when I'm done working on it, then maybe I'll go back to fit to screen so that I can see the overall picture. So a couple of tools. Now this is called, this layout here, with each of these modules in the place where they are, this is called a workspace. And if you come up here in Window, you have a variety of different workspaces. This is my editing workspace, and you'll see that there's a correlating keystroke associated with that workspace. That makes it so that you can toggle between different workspaces. But let's say just for a moment that I got to the point where I really needed to work on my audio, that I got my video where I needed it to be, and I needed to spend a little bit more time on my audio. I can click on the audio workspace, and you'll see that it reconfigures everything in this spot to be more conducive to work on audio. It gives me, once again, I still have some of the same things, but they're moved out of the way. My effect controls, my libraries, my text, and things of that sort. But you'll see how it puts right in the main area here my audio mixer, my track mixer, my source. Anyway, it puts things that are related to sound forefront and makes my video smaller. It's not as important since I'm working on the audio. And then if I go back to, in my window, to, let's say, to my editing, then it's just going to put it right back to where I had it, the way that I liked it for the editing that I was doing with my effect controls. There we go. So if you want to try out different workspaces, some of them you'll find are, here's every panel. This one's, I find, I don't like having stuff over here on the right side, and I like my timeline being as long as I can possibly make it. So I often will work in the editing workspace, but I've just found that that is my favored workspace. I recommend that you find one that works for the type of work you're doing, and that you change it, knowing nothing is lost. You'll see here that as I change it to the different workspaces, I'm not losing anything. It's just rearranging the panels, the toolboxes that I have with which to work. So you don't need to fear or when you switch workspaces. So this one's working with color and my lumetri scope and my lumetri spectrum. And let's see here, we've got the essentials. So if we want to just work on the basic essentials, which are essentially, now this one is actually a really good one within which to work. Your effect controls are here. It gives you a full timeline all the way across the bottom. So essentials is actually a really great one to work on with your project workspace up here and your effects up here. I've gotten used to having my effect controls over here on the other side. So you can take something like this and you can say, oh, I want my effect controls over here in this space, and you can customize and then create your own workspace. If that's something you want right down here, you can put all of the palettes where it works best for you, and then you can say save as a new workspace, name it, and then that becomes your favorite workspace, and it will have theirs as an option. So just know that that is something that's available to you. Okay, let's jump over to our next project, which is, let me close this project, and we're not going to save it. Okay. All right. This next one is going to be, let me come up here, videos. This is going to be our election day. So this one is not complete yet. You're going to see this one in project, or in the middle of production. But essentially what's happening with this one is I'm working with a bunch of still images. We're doing the jib-jab mode, so we're moving their jaws in relation to the sound effects. We're adding in audio. In this case, you're going to hear kind of a presidential triumphant audio at first, but then I need that to fade away when they get into the talking part. So let's play it through once, and then I'll kind of break it up and show you how to do certain parts of this that I've nested together. All right.
Donald, I'm so glad we can put aside our election season campaigning and stand together on one important issue facing our nation.
That's right, Joe. ES3 is just the best. ES3 is tremendous. Really, really huge. I mean it. They are.
And their hair smells good, too.
All right, so it's not done yet, obviously, and you can see where it breaks. And let me just point out a couple of the errors that have not been massaged out yet. So you'll see that when, let me take the audio down so that we're not harassed by the audio. You'll see that when Trump begins to talk, the coloring of that part of his face is noticeably different, right? It's brighter. So that's something that I need to work with either in Photoshop or in Premiere Pro, where I control that element. I haven't really gotten to Trump yet, so most of Biden is already working. Now, some of the elements that I'm trying to work with here is I have a static background. So the background is just a picture of the flags and the curtain, and then in the foreground I have the podiums that are before the presidents, and then I can hide anything behind that. So I have hidden there separate elements, and the elements are, you see his arms moving separate from his and his head kind of bobs back and forth. So we're going to jump into the Biden nest here, and the Biden nest. It sounds like a nest of vipers. In the Biden nest, you'll see here that this is all it is. And this is where, in terms of data and organizing your data, you just work on one element at a time. Right? And so in this case, I'm just working with the bobble of his head, I'm just working with the raising of his arms, and then I'll stick this as an entire element inside that other part there, so that as he's talking here. Now, the reason why he is where he is because I built this with the background in mind, and then I nested it together without all the other elements, right? And so because and so you'll see here that also the layers are on V6, V7, V8, and V9, because that's where these were positioned. If I had built him as a separate element to begin with, before I did anything else, then he could be a completely different size, which is actually just fine. The images that I brought in are twice the size that they are, so he's currently at 50%. And I did that so that kind of, we haven't gotten here yet with the production of this one, but we can zoom in and zoom out, right? And so I prepare the graphics at the maximum zoom in, because we can always make things smaller without problem, but it's hard to make them bigger without there being a pixelation problem, right? And so I make them bigger and then make them, and then I pull them back. Now, you'll notice here that I have a couple different tabs across the top on my timeline. This one is just related to Biden, right? And if I click into this Biden head, then it gives me a third tab across the top, and this is just the head. So I'm working so that the head is not bobbing back and forth. This is where I'm working just on the mouth. And I have the audio here. The audio was in here, right? Because it's in the primary one. But when I nest it together, it does not bring the audio in with it, right? So all I was doing was working on like when to open his mouth and when to not open his mouth. And so you can see here that I have two different layers here. And two different, so I have a closed mouth position, and then I have an open mouth position, right, that I just transitioned between, which I'll massage that on Trump's so that there's it's less noticeable with the coloring. Anyway, and then his mouth just moves up and down, and if I get to something like an M, or if there's something in there that's specifically like M, right, then I'll just go back to this position. So here in this position, Trump is talking, and he's just agreeing, and then he says at the end, he says, yeah, and his hair smells good too, or whatever it is that he's saying. I'm going to take these elements, I'm going to copy them from here, and I'm going to bring them back into my primary workspace here. And while we do it, let me just save this as Election Day Test, just so that I don't mung anything up of the actual production file. Now, when I bring things in, before I place them, I like to place them off my timeline so that they don't compete with the other elements. So let's just say, okay, here are these elements all working together. You'll notice that I got this little guy sticking up here. That probably was, oh yeah, a quick little M sound, right, in his. So I have a quick little M sound in what he was saying. Okay, so then I'm going to take this group. Oh, let me zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to bring in the audio of him talking, and we're going to see if we can nest it together. Okay, so this is the audio right here. We're going to bring that over here. We'll stick it right under, and let's hear it. Whoops. Oh, it's off of, it's in my out space.
Donald, I'm so glad we can put aside our election seat.
Okay, so this doesn't start until here. All right. So.
Donald, I'm so glad we can put aside our election season campaigning and stand together on one important issue facing our nation.
Okay, so I'm just going to take this first part here, since this is what I'm testing. I'm going to delete these other portions here. Oh, I deleted my audio. I didn't mean to do that. Let me zoom in a little. Having a hard time grabbing what I want. And, okay. So we're going to delete the elements that we don't want to test, and I'm going to delete this additional audio. It's grouped together, so let me ungroup it and delete those. Now I'm going to see if I can nest these elements all together. I'm going to guess yes. So let's just see here. Nest. We'll call this Biden speaking. And it did. It tied them together. So now when I click in the one, oh, it's way down here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Yeah, it did bring in the audio. So, yes, we can nest the audio there together.
Donald, I'm so glad we can put aside our...
And the nice thing is, so like, I started too early, right? I need to slide that over. Let's start it on time.
Donald, I'm so glad we can put aside our election season campaigning and stand together on one important issue facing our nation.
Okay. And then if I make any changes here, and I go back into my regular timeline, they will be reflected here. So that now the timing should be better. Let's just see.
Donald, I'm so glad we can...
Yeah, so it starts at the right time. Okay, so, good question, and we just resolved that. Any other questions? Okay, so the next part, I'm gonna delete that. That was just for test purposes. So then, oh, did I take away all of my audio? Let's back up. I sure did. We're going to delete some of our, or we're going to close down some of these additionals so that we see what we're working with here. Let's delete those. Okay. Alright, so we're back here. Now, once I have his mouth going up and down, I can treat this element with its own set of rules when it comes to motion. So for example, right now, I think, so I do the bobbing one layer back. So you see here that what I have is, if I click on my object, in this case it's, yeah, I've already grouped it together, so it's clicking the whole frame, but I have this little position, oh, why isn't it letting me grab it? Anyway, it allows me to position, oh interesting, what am I, it's, oh, it's because I've got a keyframe activated. Sorry about that. Let's go off of the. I don't want to undo that. Anyway, before I begin this process of moving things around position-wise and rotation-wise, it has this little pivot point that allows me to put it anywhere. So from that point, that is where the motion is going to start from. It's going to be the base point, so that when I begin to, in rotation here, when I begin to rotate it, it's rotating with that as the center of, it's the fulcrum, so to speak, of my rotation, right? Right at the base of his chin, which is what I wanted. And then, of course, with the position of his so I have it bobbing just a little bit up and down as well. It's very, very minimal. But in order to adjust with his mouth as it's doing, just to smooth it out somewhat. So if I were to take this away, let's just take that away so that we can see what would happen. So I have it moving up and down very, very, very minimally. But sometimes some of those minimal effects are the very things that kind of give lifelike to something that's so obviously not lifelike. His arms here, if I were to click on an arm layer, you can see here that they have their own set of rules. And this is where just focusing on one arm at a time and putting in the rules for just that arm, it would be kind of like if when you're doing your logo for your company, just focus on one element at a time, get that to go where you want it to go, and then just massage those details, and then you can apply those to something else. So I'm gonna hide the left arm. We're just going to focus on the right arm, and you're going to see here that all I have it doing is going up and down and up and down. It's really kind of a simple, I've got my rotate and my position. Those two things are working in conjunction with each other. But when I do the right arm, and I have it do something very similar, but I have it timed different, then that's where it gives it kind of its lifelikeliness, so that they're both doing it, but they're doing it at different times. See there, on different schedules, and that difference of time is what kind of gives that sense of the arms moving at different moving in conjunction with one another. And then, of course, the body just stays stationary. You'll see here that I have no movement on the body the whole time, which if I wanted to shrug his shoulders or something like that, I could do so. Now, I'm going to do something that's not normally part of this, but because we were talking about effects, something, there are certain things like there is if I remember right, a wave effect. It may not be called wave warp. There it is. We're going to put a wave warp on Biden's head. Now, what this does is this is a pre-programmed effect, and I can come in here and I can choose the height. Let's just make this 5, and let's make this 20, so it's half of what it was, right? And now it's going to create a sine wave that's going to, obviously it's freaky, but if you needed to have something where you needed a ripple, right? Now let me take these numbers and change them so you can kind of see. Let's make this 60 so that it's moving at an angle. Let's change the height to be 2 and the wave width to be 40. Let's go high again. Alright, now if I were to play this, you can see that there's still some like heat wave motions, right? So if you wanted something in the distance, for example, and you wanted to give it kind of that sense of these heat waves going up, this would be a great little effect that you can do. And there are all sorts of, there are hundreds of effects over here in the effects control section here, that the only way to learn them is to play around, to go in and apply different effects to different elements. And if you don't have that much time, then this is where searching for something on YouTube, looking for a very specific effect, they'll give you the name of it that you can then apply and then play with the settings. But playing with the settings here, it's the same for every effect. There are different numbers that you can push up and push down. There are different types. In this case, there are different types of waves that can be done. Here's the sawtooth wave, and let me make this bigger so that you can kind of see this scary effect. Anyway, so this is the sawtooth one, right? And so there's different types of waves that you can apply depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And obviously, this is not something that I would be doing to this right now. Here's noise. It's just adding visual noise to the item, but doing so in a wave pattern. So anyway, and when I'm working on him, of course I would zoom in on him so that you can see all the details up close and personal. This video would actually be full screen, but you're working in it in miniature while you're working on it, just so that you can see the whole thing in motion with all of these other palettes going on. Okay, so we're going to clear that wave warp, clear that effect, and we're going to come back here to our, let me turn off our music. Alright, so let's fit to screen. Alright, so as we transition into, so when it comes to elements like this, if I were to hide the heads, you can see here that I've created my environment, and I always recommend creating your environment separate from your foreground. In this case, here's my environment. It looks like I have two podiums to work with. Anyway, this background PNG just gives us this can be so easily changed to be something else, and then I can put the podiums in front. So my podiums are right up here on the very top, because as we discussed, the higher something is in your layers, the closer it is toward you, and other things can fit behind it. So in this case, Biden is going to fit behind the podium, which is why it's nested under. If I switch the order of those and I pull the podium down, you'll see that now the podium is gone. It's hidden behind him. If I pull it back up, oh, it's gone because the layer's hidden. There we are. But see, now he's in front of it, and obviously I don't want that, so I'm going to pull the podium back up in front of him or on top of him, which is essentially the same thing. a good way to visualize it is stacking pieces of paper on top of one another in a paper cutout that's got motion to it. Now, the flags here, for example, if I had brought these flags in, and this was an outdoor scene, right, I could make these flags wave with my wave tool that I was doing before, but I would need them to be a separate element than the background, right? And so it is important to consider each of your elements, where motion is going to be needed, where it's not going to be needed, so that static items can remain static and motion items can move independent of the other surroundings. Okay. All right. We're going to go back to our Pac-Man. I'm going to close this one down. We're going to go back to our I introduced the Pac-Man one in our last session, but I'm going to show you that one again just so that you can see Pac-Man Pie. Let's go ahead and just save a test version of this that I'll delete later. Alright, so in this one, you can see here that this dark green color suggests that I have nested all of these elements together. And this is really annoying music, so I'm going to... We don't want to listen to that the whole time, so I'm going to mute the music while we work on it. But the main thing, the first dilemma that I faced here was, well, twofold. First of all, it was making Pac-Man's mouth go up and down, but also look like it was old-fashioned Atari 8-bit. So in my elements, you will see that Pac-Man has been drawn as a series of 4 images. So instead of doing this with motion, I did it by stacking images over the top of each other. We're going to click on Pac-Man so that we can get to that part. And here's where it gets tricky. You can see A through Z here for the lettering. This was a dilemma that I couldn't find a better solution to. The solution I found worked just fine, but it took a little bit of coordinating, and I'll explain that in just a moment here. It had to do with masking and masking in different directions all at the same time. So if I'm going to go into Pac-Man Packing. I do recommend that you name your layers as you nest them together so that you can remember what is what. So if I click on Pac-Man Packing, then I've got here, in this I've stacked a whole bunch of just Pac-Man going up and down, opening his mouth and closing his mouth. Stacked back the entire length of the entire video that I'm working on it. If I go into any one of these, then what we have here is we have just a series of shapes stacked on top of one another. Boom, 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 open, close, right? And when it plays quickly, it just goes burnt, 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 burnt. Okay, so that when I close that, and when I stack these back together, it just gives this motion of opening, closing, but in that 8-bit Atari old-fashioned pixelated format, which was important for this particular one. So this all had to be redrawn specifically to account for that. All right, when I close that down, now that I have nested it together, before I would have to account for the location and the position of every single individual space here. So in the timeline, I would have to adjust the position independent on every single one of these, which would be a crazy headache. But now that I nest that together, now I can, if you go into my effect controls, you'll see here that I can now move him just to different parts through my positioning. So I've oriented him and created a position marker for him so that he flows through eating the letters, right? Now the next dilemma that I faced was having the letters disappear as I'm eating them, because I can't just wipe it across the screen. It's got to flow where Pac-Man is moving. So in this case, I had to compartmentalize many different things. Now I had so many layers that I was working with that you can see here that I have compartmentalized A through R, S, T, U, V, W. I've broken these apart into A through Z, 26 different segments of straight elements. And so, for example, on X here, which you'll see here just right at the end of X, which would be probably this one, X, Y, Z, right? All I'm doing here is in my mask, I'm moving my mask up and over in a straight line, up and over the. So here we are. This is my X, moving up and over those three letters. Dun, dun, dun. 8, 6, 5, right there. Now that happens when I click on X and I click on my mask. You'll see here that I have a simple mask that moves with me, and when it gets out of view, you can't see the items that are there. And I'm sure there are other ways. I looked and looked and looked. I did quite a bit of research to find an easier way to do this. And after, if I hit a certain point, I'm like, okay, an hour is long enough. I'm losing money. I'm just going to find a different Jimmy rig solution, right? So my Jimmy rig solution here was to create all of these elements as separate layers and then to stack them. So I nested. So here I have A, B, A, C. So here we have. Okay, so first of all, on my A level here in V9, I wanted that first A section here to change color, right? And so it's just going to go, red to blue to green to yellow to blue to green, right? And this is before Pac-Man gets up there. And this is to really just highlight the fact that this is pi, 31415, right? And then once that has been identified, then Pac-Man starts packing right here. So my A through M, you can see how many times I had to nest. I had to go deep. If this was Inception, I would be 9 layers in, right? Like I'm deep in here. And A is simply just a matter of moving that across the one. And then I just did the same thing with B. And you see it's a little bit longer, right? B happens right here. C happens right here on this layer. And once I got those 3 in place, then I nested them together, and then I did the next 3, right? And so that's where A through B, and then, well, all the way through H, right? So here is D, E, F, G, H. I was able to fit in 5 more layers and still have room to work on my Pac-Man. And then when I back out of that, you'll see here that now I have A through H because I grouped those 2 together, right? And then I'm working on UKLMN, which if I click in there, it's just UKLMN on my layers. Here they are. And all of them are doing essentially the same thing. They need to be in view the entire time until they're eaten, and that's why they're so long before anything happens, but then it goes away in time, and I mask that away as Pac-Man is eating them. So working the timing together, it's all very doable, but sometimes you have to come up with creative solutions for making something like this work. All right? And then, of course, when I get to my end working file here, I have to have several other things working in conjunction. So each of my ghosts are doing 2 things. In addition to following a certain path, which that's what these green things are doing, if I click onto any one of them, let's click into this one and let's zoom in on just my pink ghost. Let's go in 200%. Let's go in 400%. So if I'm looking at my pink ghost here, you see that it's blinking. So that's one thing that I'm doing. I'm causing it to blink because that's one of the things that the old Pac-Man ghosts did, right? So it's blinking. It's going on and off. If I click on here, well, actually, I'm going to need to. Oh, and then I have this eye movement that's going up and down, right? Going in circles, just like that. So that when I just look at one ghost, you can see that the eyes are going back and forth. They're following kind of their own program, and then the ghost itself is blinking. But I'm not worried about path right now. In this section, before it's nested, all I'm working on is the eyes. In this case, I've got my pixel eyes, and you can see here that they are moving up here in my position. They're just moving to different quadrants, and it's kind of blurring us together, but you can see here that I'm just toying with the different quadrants over the course of, I know that I'm working with let's say 4 seconds here, and so over the course of 4 seconds I have those eyes move quite a bit, and then I'll just have it repeat. Right, so there it goes over 4 seconds, moving those eyes around, and all the while my pixel, or my ghost, is doing this opacity change. Notice how it goes 100%, 50%, and then 100%, 50, 0. So sometimes it goes completely off, right? But sometimes it just goes down. So kind of depending on what the effect you want. There it goes. And then I'll take that exact same effect and I'll just switch out the ghost and save that ghost so that I have a pink ghost version, and I have a red ghost version, yellow ghost version, and a teal ghost version. And then in this one, this is where then I have them follow a certain path at a certain time, so that when all is said and done, let's zoom back out, all is said and done, we start off with our Pac-Man in place. We'll listen to the annoying music for effect. Now, when you're doing something like this, you have to listen to the audio again and again and again in order to position things. This one was a fun one that really tested my sanity, or actually the sanity of those who were in the same space as I was, because I'm in it, I'm focused, right, and everybody else is like, what? How often do we have to hear this sound? So being able to mute your sound and turn it on and off, or to bring it down and muffle it, make it much quieter, things like that, very, very nice controls. All right, so we've got 10 minutes here. Let's do a little bit of Q&A. If there's anything specific that you'd like to see done, we can do that. Yes, yes. And so when you're doing the keyframes on the mask, let me just run back to one of those. Let me jump in here and we'll get to our A to Z. Let's go into our X, for example. All right, so I'm in this section here and I'm working on my mask, and I have my mask path so you can see it. Right? I'm going to use my arrow. When I go to the next stage here, see how it jumps up one? So using your arrows is a great way to control exactly and precisely which frame you're working on. But if I use my arrow to go to the next frame, I can actually take any one of these points. You can see how I can turn it. I can grab a single point or both points, and I can add more points so that you can see that I can make this a very unique shape. It doesn't have to be rectangular. It can be literally whatever I want it to be. And so with each point, as I go to the next stage of my, as I then go to the next stage of my mask, you can see here that it changes depending on what it is that I want to do. So say, for example, that you had water coming in over a beach, and you're looking at it from above, and you wanted the water to wash something up and leave it on the shore, right? You can have that picture there, but it's just masked, and as the water comes up, you can, frame by frame, you can adjust that line to follow the water, and it looks like the water flows up and then leaves the thing there that was there, right? But just by manipulating just a couple of the points at a time on each frame. Is it time consuming? Yes, but can it be done? Absolutely. Then I think that's it for today.